Okay, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the One Shot Movement podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of entrepreneurs, business people, thought leaders, anyone out there making it happen. We have a phenomenal guest today, and proud to say that I'm in his mastermind because, or his university as he calls it, I'll get that right. He's got lots of masterminds, but I recently stumbled across his work, which he would refer to as art, probably 6 or 7 months ago when I was out pounding the pavements, talking about breaking the matrix, and somebody introduced me to his work, and he's just a phenomenal. I originally joined his work actually for learning technical analysis because that was a topic that I was deep in a mastermind with at the time, and then joined one of his live consciousness streams, and it was like he was just talking to me, talking my language, and exploring areas that I knew a little bit at surface level, but never really dived into around astrology and numerology and what he would refer to as the esoteric realm. So we're going to be talking becoming healthy, wealthy, wise from a phenomenal entrepreneur and experienced entrepreneur and life stories like you wouldn't believe. So he goes by the alias Waters Above. So welcome to the show, Waters Above.
I'm really grateful to have connected with you, brother, and I appreciate all your support. It's amazing to have you with us, and yeah, I'm just grateful to have connected here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Look, I always like to just, I provide an intro or a very short version of your story to edify you into the show. But if you can just spend a few minutes providing a bit of context of sort of your story and where you got to today, and then we'll pick up the conversation from there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to summarize it, I got really interested in learning more about the energy of money and how all of this, matrix works with regards to currency. And it kind of led me down several rabbit holes of learning about the Federal Reserve System, central banking, fractional reserve banking, etc. And that research took me deeper and deeper and deeper to places where you start learning like the rules and the laws of money. So a lot of my interest in all of that came from that research, and I was always fascinated by numerology. I was always fascinated by how numbers and I was also really fascinated by etymology. So just the way what words are made of and what are their origins and how they're kind of spells, and always been very fascinated with communication. And all this stuff sort of kind of came to this apex where I was like, okay, how could I combine everything so that I could provide a very authentic version of how I perceive reality? And specifically for the markets, which is, I guess, how you initially found my work, which is how many find my work. And I was just like, okay, well, I'm really good at reading these charts when it comes to technical analysis, and I'm pretty skilled in recognizing patterns very quickly. I think that comes from my background as a musician. It's important to remember parts of songs or to kind of anticipate what could be next if you're jamming with somebody. There's kind of like this feeling and flow that goes into it. And I just carried over all those past skills that I had with those art forms into this current one. And I tried to make something that I felt was very good, a good representation of my outlook and my core philosophy. So I guess that's like the generalized story of how we got here today. I have been very motivated and inspired to provide something that isn't your typical kind of thing you come across whenever you're searching the internet for art or education or words of wisdom or inspiration or motivational content. I wanted to provide something that I thought could be very multifaceted and also kind of speaks to the core of everyone. I think that's probably the where I'll wrap up that idea is that I really wanted to make something where I felt like it brought something out of people that wasn't all about your identity. And I noticed that it's a kind of a common thing, even in the so-called truther community or the so-called like, enlightened or awakened ones, is they tend to speak to people that look like them, act like them, and associate with what they associate with. And I kind of find it amazing now that I have people from Australia, or I have people from like New York City, or I have people from India, or I have people from Russia even that are like fascinated with what we're doing here with Waters Above. So that's probably like the big takeaway from it all was like I wanted to make something where everyone could tap into it. And I think obviously making money is one thing, but learning about how to attract money and learning how to attract, core authentic relationships is also really important too. So, I guess I kind of briefly touched on all of the components of my work here.
Yeah, and I guess I'll touch on a topic because it's a personal one to start with. I was a business entrepreneur, had a lot of success for 20 odd years, and I always stayed quite in my lane in regards to controversial topics. It could be religion, war, what side of politics that you're on, and the COVID-19 sham. Was the time that I sort of broke out of that shell. And I simply put a post up maybe April, May 2020 that, hey, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 4. This is what the media is doing here. They're trying to sell a story that, that just doesn't make any sense at all. So I was sort of a bit of a voice of reason to many until I got kicked off Facebook a dozen times over the next few years. But I created a show at the time. I took some time out of business. It was called Navigating the Fog to Thrive on the Other Side. So it was about how to navigate through this chaos so you can thrive on the other side. And I ended up having 30 phenomenal guests that were really outspoken on that topic. And yeah, a lot of people would always say, you're like my voice of reason. You're like a horse whisperer. And people had said that to me in business. But when I listened to you talk about this topic or anything, I sort of this guy's the wisdom, the voice of reason, the horse whisperer that people have said to me over the years. And I actually recently said to my wife that there's a certain level of peace and calm that has come to the chaos of the world. And you said, look, the New World Order didn't just start COVID-19, and that was episode number one. That was like
Yeah.
1899. Do you want to explain a little bit in context of what that actually means? If you sort of join I'm sure you join the dots of what I was talking about, but
Yeah.
if you can go back to there, that'll be a great starting point.
Yeah, I think, that also comes from my study of markets too. You study that you find out that these things are cyclical in their patterns and they repeat. And there's so many parallels that are drawn between other events that are historically provable, like even with Spanish flu. I think that's a great example. And anyone could just take a couple seconds to go to Wikipedia and type in Spanish flu, and you'll start to quickly see how many synchronicities there are. There's a lot of synchronicities. So when you start seeing the cities of the key events and the timeline, you're like, oh, okay. So it was like a one-to-one. It just with their level of technology and resources and the way they communicated, which was via radio, newspaper, etc. Now we just do it through a mobile device, right? Or social media. So we're much easier to hypnotize right now in this grand chess game. But I use the word chess game consciously because that's what you were kind of hinting to with the whole like, this is not a novel idea or concept. It's part of a grand scheme where there's many, many more moves to play, and there's been many moves that have kind of been happening slowly. And if you take a little bit of time to study chess, you know that there's like a lot of technique, but the kind of the game is very much at a certain level. The grandmasters, the people that are very good at it, it's very mechanical. It's very computer-like, or it's algorithmic in a way. It's pattern based, and now chess is at a place where and everything I'm explaining right now will make sense in a moment. But I was listening to one of the best chess players alive, this guy Magnus Carlsen, and he said that now chess is like almost boring because everything is so repeating patterns, and you anticipate everything pretty much as it is because of the theory is so predictable, right? Well, now his focus is like, how do I make a game exciting? How do I spice it up? So I think the New World Order, the apex predator, the people that are ruling the world, like they know that some of us, and I'm not trying to say this to flex, but like I feel like I'm one of those few that I can be calm enough and like regulate my nervous system enough to see the moves they're making and to anticipate what the moves will be next. But their job is really to just be like, well, how do we spice it up? Like, how do we add that kind of slight nuance to make it so it feels like it's never happened before. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Even this kind of Trump character, like it feels so new to have this type of guy in power. But there's been patterns before of these sort of things, and I'm not trying to say that it's a one-to-one personality, but that is what I'm kind of revealing with the spice is all you need is the same agenda, the same protocol, the same puppet masters, but the nuance will be the personality. And that's a beautiful, kind of explanation of what's happening on our world stage. Everything is so easy to manipulate through the character that's behind it. And I suspect we're at a very important time in history where we sort of need a see-through character. We do need to be a little bit more um tapping into discernment to be like, yo, this person's a character. They're not an authentic creator. They're just playing a role, right? They're an actor. And we kind of love watching the Hollywood play so much that even when we get somebody that we know is a straight up actor, we still kind of find room in our hearts to be like, well, maybe this time will be different. Maybe this will be the real one that saves us. And I think that's such a dangerous hypnosis that so many people are under. And I suspect, like, by me speaking this way and not being so aggressive about it, it's tapped into a lot of people to get them to realize, like, okay, there's something to this knowing, and that how can we navigate this matrix or how can we navigate this so-called reality in a way where we're preserving our calories for what matters. Because I don't believe in this whole like stand on the corner of the Times Square with a sign being like, don't take the jab, you know? Like I'm just not that. I don't think that creates any outcome beyond you just trying to like make people concerned with the same things you're concerned with. And that's not the way the world works. Like everything is about levels of consciousness, right? And eventually you'll tune to a level where you're ready to accept that frequency, right? Like if I was to speak on a microphone to everyone in the world, it would be really tough for a lot of people. It'd be really fucking hardcore, you
Mm.
know? It's just not everyone's ready for that frequency. So what I'm learning a lot about life is like if I could be the most useful to the world, it's to help them tap into a being state where it will be more acceptable to more people to hear your truth because you don't need to do it through conflict. You don't need to do it through saying that you're better than other people. You don't need to do it by saying you're smarter or you're wiser or you're richer or any of that shit. Like the ego doesn't need to be the core identity here. And you could accomplish this in a different way. I guess the C19 times were tough for people perhaps like us because we had to compete against the Andrew Tates and these big head, figureheads on the world stage that are kind of saying provocative yet motivating things. But it's like, look at how they're luring you in. They're luring you in with Bugattis and like paid, showgirls to like sucker everyone in optically into this like illusion that if you act and speak like me, you'll attract this type of success or lifestyle or whatever. But it's like I don't actually think any of this is what we should be desiring right now. And I'm starting to kind of be grateful for the C19 time. Well, I've been grateful for it for a while, and that might be shocking to people, but it allowed me the room to create my business. It allowed me room to like feel what it's like to watch the water get above the eye level. You know what I mean? Like it was tough because I didn't want to wear a mask. I didn't want to take the jab. I didn't want to do any of that shit. So I was like, okay, well, if I don't want to do that stuff, nobody's here to save me. So I have to figure this out. Like I have to do some shit about this. And I'm trying to tap into the world right now with this knowing to get them to realize that this C19 thing is just one of many, many more dominoes to fall. And perhaps we could talk about that. Um, how do we motivate people to realize like that scam was like fucking pales in comparison to what's coming next?
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned that, and I guess the ease and the calmness, just to extend on to what you're saying, was around, I guess these manifestos that you can read that are in open public domain, and concepts like Agenda 30. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are saying we've got to push back until, so they can't push forward with Agenda 30. And the peace and the calmness comes, they've already sort of embedded AI and robots and and everything anyway. So it's going to happen. So just be calm, be at ease. Whereas for someone like me, I'm like, yeah, we do need to push back to a point that we can be a level of resistance. Would you sort of, yeah, if you want to address anything I said there, that would be good.
I think the resistance is you just being authentic. I don't think the resistance is in you trying to resist. That's the difference. Like, have you ever tried opening up a door that's just like kind of stuck and like the lock isn't opening up and like you put force and you get frustrated and then you get more frustrated and then you put more force and like you think through force you're gonna solve this issue, but it's like rarely the case. And there's so many of these little instances where you kind of realize that it's not about like rowing the boat, it's about sailing. It's about learning how to sail. Like it's about learning how to work with the winds. So there, if we were to bring up this core word of resistance, I suspect it just has to be like, what's your individual relationship with what that word means? Because for me, when I think of resistance, I think of like controlling. I think of like, I want to control everything as my ego and my perception believes is best. But when you really become a leader, you learn that being a great leader is actually about making room for better ideas than your ideas. It's about being around great people by you be embodying greatness. And then now you also have to make room for like, what's Craig's ideas? Oh, Craig has a better idea than I have. We need to go with Craig's idea. That's like what we need to work towards. What's the fucking resistance there? There's only resistance when I want to control you or when I want to say, no, Craig's below me in this situation, therefore my idea is better. But that's how a lot of systems start to work. So when you see these so-called and I don't want to sound disrespectful, I'm just kind of using this for context, but like you see a lot of truther communities that are led by some figurehead, and that's kind of their methodology of like getting their quote unquote resistance accomplished by having like minions, like foot soldiers. And like I think the biggest fuck you to the system is just disregard it. Like disregard, like imagine everyone right now studied the tax code. Like the whole taxation system would start to like dissolve. Imagine everyone learned how to make their own business. Like a lot of this corporate world, this corporatocracy would start to just crumble. So like in my opinion, there's always the best resistance is the increasing your conscious awareness and operating from a higher conscious level, not from a material desire based level. And I can't do anything about the fact that, and I believe you agree with me, we can't do anything about the fact that the world has become more and more materially obsessed, right? And also more and more reliant on other people to do things for them. And that's where the AI thing will be the perfect launch pad for the success of things like Agenda 2030 and many other operations that are going to unfold soon.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess like I sort of started off with talking a little bit about healthy, wealthy, and wise, and I always say to everyone, life is a journey, and you've got to go through experiences, highs, lows, challenges, the good times, the bad times, grief, suffering, euphoria, every experience under the sun, and I always say to people, it's like working life out sometimes, if you look at it metaphorically, is like those thousand-piece jigsaw puzzles. And you just hold it up and you just drop it on the ground, and it's broken into a thousand pieces. And every little piece sort of needs to be put back together through your journey of life. And it'll be experiences and lessons learned and these dot connecting moments. And I guess some people, when they drop their puzzle, they might be 50 years old and they haven't got one piece put together. And the first piece is, oh shit, Santa Claus is not real. And then, but then there's some people with a conscious awareness and their puzzle gets dropped and like accent sort of built already because they've sort of been joining the dots on stuff, where do people start to learn? Like you said that you had an interest in the financial markets and the system that took you down a few rabbit holes onto a few other ones that helped you start figuring stuff out. Where's the best place for people to start figuring stuff out?
Be very honest with yourself about what you fear. And I think there's a way too much of this like avoiding darkness thing. There's a lot of this like I'm aware of trauma from childhood or I'm aware of like, whatever's going on in my local reality that is preventing me from making my biggest breakthroughs. But then there's this avoiding or this numbing mechanism, right? So a lot of people are just comfortably numb. And my technique is like you get started by just being very honest with yourself about what it is that you fear. So I feared being broke. I feared being poor. So I started learning about the system in response to that instead of complaining about it and saying, oh, look at these billionaires, look at this person driving the nice car. Like I started rewiring my consciousness to be instead of whenever I see a nice car and I get judgmental about it, I see a nice car and I feel better for the person that has it. The same effect happens when you get into like if you break up with somebody or you have a divorce or whatever, like people see happy couples and then they're just bitter at the fact that they're seeing somebody who has something they don't. So like my thing is like, well, if you want a better relationship or you want to attract a relationship, then when you see relationships, be excited for those people that have that. Like start to carry a frequency where like instead of this fear and you're having a fear and then reacting to it judgmentally and being bitter about it, start to accept the fact that you want that too and that you need to actually allow for everyone else to have these things so that you could be a part of that shared kind of connected grid of energy. You feel me? So when you don't allow for other people to enjoy or be excited, this is repelling from you the abundance and the opportunities. And I'm a firm believer that, like, when you give up trying to control everything and you just seat yourself back into your body and you allow for the truth of it all, which is that we all have fears, we all have insecurities, we all have shit that we're trying to like work through that we operate in silence with. And my methodology is like I just need to let it all out like as much as I possibly can, whether that be with the microphone that I'm speaking into, or whether that be with my friends, family, or whether that be through my music, through art that I create. Find an outlet for it, but don't fucking avoid it. And stop all this like, everything is good, everything is happy, unicorns and rainbows. Like, because a lot of people in the spiritual community tend to kind of operate in that way and they're lying to themselves. And that's another form of being numb. So I think like, yeah, escapism needs to be re-evaluated, and I don't think there's anything to escape from. That's what I've talked about a lot in my work when everyone's saying I need to escape the matrix. Like Andrew Tate, for instance, uses this as like his slogan. And I tell people there is no matrix to escape. Like you literally are the matrix. And that should be super fucking motivating. The fact that you are everything. You're the whole universe. You're all the light. You're all the dark. You're everything that was, is, will be. Everything exists because of you. Everything exists because you observe it or you witness it. And that means it comes to life or it has life force because you have life force. So everything is a reflection of you and your knowing. And this, as you go through life, there's no puzzle to piece together. You are the entire puzzle. You're the floor that the puzzle will be placed on. You're the hands that are piecing together the puzzle pieces. You're the shadows in between each piece. Like, that is not what most people are ready to hear. You know what I'm saying? Like, humanity isn't ready to hear what I just said because the game to them is not even something they realize. They think this whole thing called life is like serious and it's like incredibly consequential and all. They're not here to learn from life. They're here to control and be like this like sort of like overlord of life. And then there's people that are just waiting for overlords to show up and tell them how to be, right? Right? Like there's the employer, then there's the employee. And I guess like if I could just kind of summarize the whole idea, it's that there's this knowing that comes with it's okay to be vulnerable and not avoid what you fear. And if I can, like, the biggest breakthrough that I made in my life was just like tapping into the things that I fear and owning them You know what I mean? Instead of trying to hide away from them, or instead of thinking that others will judge me if I was to show them my weaknesses. Now I'm like the opposite. It's like I want to find out where my weaknesses are. I want to share them with the world, and then I think I will start to attract people that will bring strength to me.
Mm. Yeah, totally agree, and well put as well. I actually do want to talk about vulnerability in a second, but while you were talking about that, something was jumping, and I have heard you not necessarily have conflict in this in the past, but somebody might challenge you around, I guess, the belief of, say, religion or God or something like that. And oh, do you believe in God? Well, if you don't, I'm more superior to you. Is that a part of the escapism, that following the Bible, that you're holy and and then you would say to somebody, well, religion's religion, and they say, well, I'm born again Christian, so that's not religion, that's the truth.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about this. Is this sort of like a part of the same puzzle that you were just explaining there?
I think people just like to associate with something that could be a part of their identity and provide some sort of like outer layer to who they are because they don't want to be soul. They want to be, for example, Craig, born again Christian, white male from, whatever town who's an entrepreneur. And when you associate with all that stuff, like you're kind of putting a bunch of wrapping paper on the gift, and then we never get to see the fucking gift. So when people come to me and like they're listening to my live stream, I just do it to play with people, because I think that's what I'm here to do. Like when people take their identity so seriously, I just show them how I could be playful with it, and then it gets them to kind of think about like why is it that I associate with this stuff? For example, I'll talk for a while about whatever philosophical kind of like idea came to be from a question that I received. And then somebody will say, Waters, are you a Christian? And my whole thing is like, well, if I told you what I prescribe to, then you're going to judge me based off of my answer. But my answer has nothing to do with who I am. And it has nothing to do with who you are either. And what happens is, what can we learn from that answer? I've spoken to Christians who have been committed to this thing for 30, 40, 50 years, and they don't know much about the Bible they read. They don't know how to decode the Bible. They don't understand any pages that they're sifting through. They're just going through it so matter of factly, and they don't see the parable in it all. They don't see the wisdom that it's actually providing in a deep sense, in a very deep, Gnostic, esoteric sense. So, like, people know how to read because of definitions, but there's a reason why it's called definition, because you're deaf, you do not hear. You only have one element of sensory. I'm trying to tap into people to tell them you'll feel God when you actually look into what's being spoken about, not only in the Bible, not only in Christianity, but in every Abrahamic religion and in all of the ones that came before it that it plagiarized. So it's just everything is all coming back to the same source, which is what I just told you before. It's that you are the universe. So Jesus becomes Jesus Christ when he learns that God is within him. And I think Alan Watts said this one time, and it's pretty funny. He's like, the last person that found out God was within them got crucified because he realized it, And it's like, that's the thing. When you realize this truth, now everyone starts to treat you like you're a blasphemer. But that's obviously not the case. And some people, they come across my work and they take it as me saying that you are the God, like, and they get offended by that. So I'm like, oh, so everyone's just getting offended by identity. It's like an identity crisis that we're all going through. And I'll quickly explain why, just really briefly. It's because we're transitioning ages. We're not quite in the Aquarian age yet, but like we're transitioning ages. And part of this transition into an of the Aquarian essence, it will be removal of your identity. This is why they were able to get away with like all this trans, identity politics stuff, which I could really give two shits about because like I'm all about people should just embrace what they feel they belong to and what makes them comfortable. And the same thing goes for Christians. If you want to be that, that's beautiful. If you want to eat a different way from me, that's beautiful. As long as you're being honorable and you're not doing it to prove a point or to show off. It's like if you really feel comfortable there, then I honor that, and I think that's beautiful. So I'm not like anti any of these things. I just find it to all be circumstantial. But when it's clearly an agenda that's being pushed by the same fucking people that are doing everything else, then we've become, illumined to the fact that there's something that's going on here, and that's to wipe away the identity. So masculine, feminine, gender roles, age and sexuality is in the process of being removed. Like we're talking about the most distorted and demoralized protocol that they're like embedding into society. And it wasn't just one moment. It's been like a 25-year process. It starts with like the AIDS scamdemic. That's really like where they're like targeting homosexuals and then kind of like creating that one negative narrative, and then now you give them everything with no effort, right? It's like an overnight success story where like the more you fit into that particular community, the more like godly you are. So if like you're fitting all the narratives, black, fat, like trans, then you become more holy, right? And that's kind of where, so what I'm explaining without getting off the rails is that the more identity you stack onto your physical avatar, the more you become like a demigod. But they're doing that on purpose because they want right now certain types of people that don't identify with stuff to be kind of like you're the enemy, right? So we've seen that become a thing too with the Black Lives Matter movement, where it's like if you're a white man, now you're the enemy just by default. Like no matter who you belong to or associate with or hang out with, it doesn't matter. It's just like by default, that's the thing. So this
Mm.
distortion of identity is necessary. To wrap up the idea, when we left the last age, it was a law that if you kept any of the symbology of the old age, you would be killed, not even imprisoned, but you would be ritually sacrificed. So this is the whole like not worshiping the golden bull calf thing. That was serious because that had to do with the Aryan essence, the age of Aries, moving away from Taurus. And like you see where I'm going with this? It's like it's very much of the ages. So we're gonna watch identity be removed and replaced with the genderless, emotionless kind of like Black Mirror episode that we've all watched, you know? And my thing is that I think people like us, the resistance will be just maintaining. We don't even have to do anything, bro. We just don't have to get suckered in or hypnotized into this ridiculousness. And that's clearly going to be the case for many. So I'm not defeatist. I'm actually very inspired. And I think there's going to be so much beauty out of that quote unquote resistance of just be Craig. Don't
Mm.
give that up, you know? But don't be mad at everyone in the world because they don't prescribe to the thing that you prescribe to. You know, that's like that kind of balance beam. So I guess that's my overall take on the transition of ages that we're in the process of as we speak.
Mm. And just before I move on to the vulnerability question, like, I guess is one strategy from the powers to be, the establishment, if you can add the alphabet group and put them all in different paddocks with invisible things, and they'll fight each other and leave the grifters above alone. So the feminists sit over here, and the gays sit over there, and the
Yeah.
cookers sit into that little paddock over there, and let them all just fight each other, and they just sit up there in their high horse like the show Gladiator 2, which I just found hilarious. It was like demasculated men watching people fight, and you've got the real life Homer Simpson sitting in the crowd clapping and cheering. And do you see that as a bit of a metaphor, like get everyone into separate paddocks where they can fight each other and leave us alone?
Yeah, there needs to be distractions on top of distractions on top of distractions, and divide and conquer is kind of like their motto. So I think we're watching that happen pretty obviously, and the next form of division will be the implementation of humanoid robots, because you'll see that not only are humans defaulting to artificial intelligence, they'll also be defaulting to the connection with humanoid robots instead of the connection with humans who would provide things like challenge and resistance and perhaps that right there is pretty damn messed up because for the people that aren't into the whole identity politics thing, again, based on consciousness, they're going to default to humanoid robots too, because they're like, oh, this game that I'm seeing go on in certain places is too scary and too weird for me. So I think, yeah, the ultimate end game, in my opinion, based on everything I've studied, it keeps coming back to that. It's like, how does the apex predator invite the humanoid robot into the picture in the way that has the most damage control as part of their strategy? Like by damage control, I mean everything the elite does is damage control. Everything. Like even the George Floyd thing. It's like, okay, these the 80% is starting to get pretty riled up. Like they're probably gonna revolt soon. We got to kill some guy on camera, post that, and give them a cause.
Mm.
That's all part of the methodology. And some people would say, well, didn't that create more chaos? The difference is it was organized chaos. It was chaos with a direct cause. But if you had chaos for the right reason, which is for true sovereignty and the desire to unite with everyone and not be divided by things like race or gender or identity-based things, the New World Order fucking loses because that's been their whole shtick from day one. What do you think the Holy Roman Empire is, right? What do you think the concept of slavery or the removal of Aborigine? Like all of these were identity-based things, which of course come with other layers like communication, culture, lifestyle, etc. But this whole like living in peace and harmony thing, it's first of all, it's not possible, and second of all, the way to accomplish it would be to have a very, very tactical blueprint. And I think that the New World Order knows how to do this with their future plans of like the own nothing and be happy World Economic Forum shit, because they know the money squeeze is probably the biggest thing, which is what I'm trying to teach people right now. It's like as they're distracting you with all the bullshit that the C-19 and they're basically you're watching every business fall apart. You're watching the cost of life just dramatically increase. Food is getting more expensive. Housing is getting more expensive. You're getting priced out of everything. And in the whole time, you were waiting for some glorious politician to show up to save you. And you never created a business. You never learned how to invest because you're still distracted by what's going on. Like if what's going on at the Grammys. I think that's probably the number one thing for entrepreneurs right now to talk about. It's like how to help each other not get fucking distracted at the most crucial time in history where your attention and focus is paramount.
Mm. Well said. I want to move on to vulnerability because I have a story to share.
Hmm.
You can pull it apart any way you want. The One Shot Movement podcast started with a book. You've got one shot, and that book was written off a personal experience. And the personal experience was my wife and I. We lost our first son, who was a stillborn baby, and
Hmm.
and the reason I want to share this with you because you talk about vulnerability and prior to that experience, I don't think I'd ever cried. I don't think I'd opened up. I nearly lost everything in the global financial crisis. I was living with my now wife and still didn't let her know the damage and the chaos that my life was in, owning 5 fitness clubs and had property portfolio and every decision the GFC was happening was killing my business. But losing Ethan was the first time that I cried, and I just in the birthing suite, I sort of was in a position where I didn't want to do something, but I had to do it anyway. I was like losing, you don't want to watch your wife deliver your baby that's not going to be going home with you, but you don't have a choice. You just have to do it. And I was talking to Dr. John D. Martini about it, and he said your brain was in the freeze phase, the fight, flight, or freeze. But going through that experience, in that birthing suite while she was delivering, I probably cried. I felt like hours non-stop, and it was pretty profound experience. And I just felt like drained, didn't know if you're confused, in shock. And out of that experience, I ended up saying to Ethan when I met him, I said, "Look, you'll leave a legacy on the planet." even though it's not going to be physical, because I'll start a movement, a message of you got one shot at life, give it your best shot, whatever it is for you. Climb the corporate ladder, be the best parent, whatever it is. And that sort of is now 200 interviews, which you're now a part of, and books, courses, all sorts of different stuff. But the question about the vulnerability, prior to that, I was probably a little bit of an empty vessel where I would be that stoic male that wouldn't share emotion, wouldn't share challenge or anything. And now I'm sharing this with you now. Do you want to just talk to the importance of vulnerability and how that can impact you and improve your life?
Yeah, well, first of all, like I'm really I'm grateful that you shared that story because that's super powerful and it pretty much represents the exact essence that I try to reveal in my university behind how to create a business in the most honorable, authentic, and vulnerable way that is incredibly touching and maybe not relatable for everyone, but it taps into an energy that's beyond a product or it's behind beyond a service or it's beyond any of that type of stuff. Like it has soul. Like everything that you just explained about what one shot is, it's more than a business in that way, right? It's like it has soul, it has life force to it, and you put intent behind it by saying that Ethan is kind of the sun of this solar system of one shot in a way. Like it's the sun of the solar system, not you, not Craig. Like you're the moon in a way. And that's a very beautiful thing. And I think that all the greatest things are built off of that, literally. Like it's not necessarily just the having to go through something traumatic, but it's like the events, the way they were laid out. And it sounds like you also tapped into like pretty big release, you know? Like you probably had what I would assume is decades of just like stored energy. And for men especially, like I know what it's like growing up in New York City with a single mother and like I had to as a child protect my mom even if I physically couldn't, you know? That's a serious burden to have as a child because people are fucked up, you know? People are like will rob you, they'll steal knife to your throat, like all sorts of crazy shit. And you have to be like a child that like expects or anticipates that sort of stuff. And that could make you like that'll make you like always looking over your shoulder and always nervous and always like, you know what I mean? And it took me years to break through that, to not be so nervous and to not be so worried and to not be like thinking that everybody's a potential bad guy that could harm the person that I need to look after, right? So that masculinity sometimes it overtakes us and it kind of becomes more that the vessel has the tightest lid ever. And eventually a moment happens where although it could be incredibly tragic, it allows us to like finally open up the lid to that vessel. And you see like what it creates and the connections that it makes. And that's really, really beautiful, man. Like I'm glad that you shared that. And I think everyone who's in my university especially will now see that what I was trying to explain by creating a business in this particular way or creating something that actually has life force to it. And it's not out of the whole like I want to make money for this skill that I have. It's not about that. It's so much more. Like so man, yeah, I'm really glad that we met. I'm glad that we connected and I'm grateful that you are doing what you're doing because it's not being done by many, you know? And I heard this one guy, this Jay Shetty. Do you know him? He's like a really big. I heard that his whole backstory was fake.
Mm,
And that's heartbreaking because I'm like, you fucker.
mm,
You don't do this to people. Like you don't make a fake, like what's the point of making a fake story? Either you have handlers. I'm not trying to go there right now. I'm just saying that like that real authenticity is so important. That real truth is so important. Do you feel like that when you started to tap into that energy that you now started making more authentic and like better connections overall? Like you, I say that like you start meeting your true people once you tap into that energy. If you're holding everything in and you're like really, really stubborn about being emotional or being like a human, let's just call it what it is, then you kind of repel the real ones that are designed to be in your reality. So like what was that experience for you after the fact?
Yeah, look, it was like I grew up in a very small mining town. even in the wedding speeches, my best man and my father-in-law basically referred to me the Tin Man, the guy that doesn't have a heart, doesn't show emotion. So I sort of come from that sort of tough upbringing, left home at 15, looked after myself, I'll fight through type of attitude my whole life. But I guess probably the best way to answer that question would be I've done a lot of speaking gigs, and when I close out, I don't sort of reveal until the end that experience, and I can drop the entire audience to pin drop status and tears, like just sharing that close out to that story. And I think, yeah, the vulnerability and it connects with people, and um, yeah, people have, yeah, it's like a super, not a superpower is not the right thing, but a message like that resonates with a lot of people.
No, it is. No, vulnerability is the superpower because once you relate, you can now have you could have chemistry. I talk about this quite often. Like, I go out of my way in every human connection I could possibly make to not make it be about me educating or teaching somebody or to explain a thing that is going on with me. I actually use it as an opportunity to tap into somebody else in a vulnerable sense. Because I find that if I can make some emotion come out of someone that day, that they'll be getting value out of that moment. And I think so many people walk around with this like very like tense sort of state. And there's no flow state. It's just tension. Like most people are walking around stiff, very like tense. And I'll admit, like, I'm kind of this way too in some ways. I feel like my gift is to just help others unlock that. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect, you know? I'll be honest. So, like, I'm even the one that's quite tense and quite serious, and like, I'm not as emotional about everything. But, yeah, because there's a difference between gifts, skills, and some things that you kind of have to just accept that you need to do, right? It's not necessarily a skill if it's just something you need to do. And also there's gifts where it's beyond something that you worked hard at, you just have. So I think like there's some kind of like trifecta there that we tap into. And for me, I want every experience I have some piece of real, authentic, genuine feeling state, not just an exchange of information. And I learned this by I lived in Portland, Oregon for like 5 or 6 years. And every fucking day somebody showed up and they were like, oh, it's raining today. And I'm like, yeah, it fucking rains half of the year. What are we talking about? Like, why are we wasting our energy on this? And then I got into like the truther community and they're all like, oh, Bill Gates is a lizard person or whatever. I'm like, why are we talking about this still? Like, this is so boring. So like every day I just realized like there's no life force in this stuff anymore. Your story had life force.
Mm.
And that story is within a lot of people. There's some nugget there in every single one of us that we just like avoid because there's some level of like either you don't want to be judged or you don't want somebody to just pity you or you don't like there's so many of these different elements at play here. And sometimes the timing just isn't right. But for me, I still try to practice the skill of like, how can I relate to somebody else in any capacity? And if I can't relate to them at all, like even if they're like what some people call an NPC, I still try to find like, what's the human here? Like, what's that soul within the person? And that's actually probably like my biggest piece of wisdom that I could provide anyone at any stage in life. It's just like go out of your way to see the humanity in people, even if you don't agree with them, even if they are like a diehard sports fanatic that like, drinks 12 light beers a night. Like there's still a person in there. And I fucking bet you if you tap into that humanity within them, they'll start to change their behaviors too, because you'll leave an impact on them. And a lot of the reason they are becoming like just addicted to all of this stuff is because they have no people to actually be real with. It's easier to only just drink with the sports buddies, right? There's never any value in that situation. There's like false sense of community. Hence why the New World Order gives us bread and circus.
Mm,
They want you all just staring at some other people doing stuff so that you yourself never build with your people.
mm,
I mean, it's pretty obvious. So imagine we were all vulnerable with each other. We would all trust each other more. We would all build together more. Businesses would be easier to create. And I hope that's what my university kind of paves the way for. It's like, okay, we have potentially thousands of people someday that are all not necessarily sharing a vision, but we're allowing room for each other's vision and we're being vulnerable in the process. And every single business will have a beautiful story that's in alignment with something like what you're sharing. And I couldn't imagine what that could become, you know? Like I'm really excited and I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
mm. Thank you. And just an extension of that, like it's been a I don't know how to describe it, but coincidences and synchronicities. And like I reflect back my journey in life, and I always go, "Oh, that had to happen then because of this," and I walked that way instead of turning that way, and like you start seeing these things pop up into your life. Like I might have a conversation on the phone with somebody, and he's telling me a story that I was thinking like 5 seconds earlier. Like, how does all that work?
Can you explain, like rephrase that for me?
Look, I guess like I've heard you talk about synchronicities and but coincidences like for example, I was listening to you on one of your AMAs, and you mentioned 33, for example. At the same time that you said that word on my phone, 33 emails had come up like as a red flash
Mm,
33 on my on my Gmail calendar, and I'm going, he's just said 33, that's just popped up 33. That's like just an example of just coincidence of something that happens. But I think as I've looked back and reflected on my life, I've sort of jotted, like I broke my arm playing sport. I didn't go down the sport path anymore. I went down the business. It had to happen that way. Then I got to this juncture and I walk through this door instead of this door. And,
yeah.
that's probably it. Even like the Ethan experience, I look into that, and I started originally every year writing a tribute to him on his birthday of the biggest lesson I learnt the year before as a piece of wisdom for people to take away. They're like really big, long blogs. And then 4 years later, I decided to write a book and launch the one shot movement concept. And I put each tribute into the book, but it's like I was telling a story, 4 years before, and I'm going, was that just a coincidence that it happened that way? But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know if you know any.
Yeah, no, I do think like uh, I don't want to get super personal here, but using like the broken arm example, like I think that's it, bro. Like God breaks your arm. Like it's just it's fucked up, but it is what it is. Like it's we want to be in control, right? Like we're like I want to be a sportsman, and then God is like no. Like so I think that a lot of the things that we have that are like dis-ease illness, like tragedy, all of that, as unfortunate as it sounds, is it's a way of like getting you to make the choices that are in alignment with this version of your experience here in the simulacrum. You are here to have this simulated experience in this particular way because your higher self needs to get something out of this experience. It's not about leaving rich. It's not about leaving successful. It's not about leave. No, it's like any video game. In any video game, if you've beaten it once, you either want to beat it on a harder difficulty or you want to play a different game. It's one or the other. So I'm pretty certain that if like I could compile what I believe is going on here, it's that like all of our mistakes or our mishaps or our failures or our tragic, our losses, they're actually just launch pads for the right, you know, version of you to explore this reality in the way that you were destined to. And we could associate these things as losses or we could associate them as tragedies, but like really at the end of the day, I bet you if we can tap into like it on a very deeply conscious level, like from the spirit realm perspective, I think we would know that everything that we've quote unquote lost is actually still a part of us, not necessarily in the physical. And you already tapped into that knowing. You explained it before. And that means you, my friend, are an alchemist. You have the ability to transmute from one form to the next. We don't lose anything in this life. It's always been, it will always be. It just changes forms.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think one topic I think I've heard you talk about the ego. I think there's a lesson in there extended into this around self-awareness, your intuition, and um, I often say the hidden hand of, you get ahead of yourself and you think that you're it probably is what you're just referring to then, like you'll get humbled by the universe when you show up and you pretend that you're bigger and better than you are, or you're self-promoting beyond belief. The hidden hand will actually say, no, no, you need to come back and we need to put you back in place, or something
Hmm.
like that. But just the ego, like I think a lot of people, like an ego blind spot, maybe a thing where they keep on tripping over their self because they lack self-awareness. They lack awareness of their ego. Do you want to sort of talk to that a little bit? Because there's people can actually grow by having better self-awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of my take on the ego, and it's a very maybe controversial concept, but I'll quickly explain it in the most simple form to provide some foundation here to my response. And it's to me, the ego is the co-pilot. And I think the co-pilot is very necessary when you actually want to be a pilot. But the thing is most people don't want to be a pilot. They want to be a passenger. Some people are flight attendants. That's it. And like if you want to be a leader, you want to embody leadership, then you have to learn how to become a pilot. And I think soul is the pilot. And I think the ego is it's a part of the soul, which is something that it's spoken about in like Egyptian, but I'm not going to go there. The point that I'm making is I look at like if I wanted to simplify the whole thing, you have a co-pilot. It's called your ego. And like you don't ever let that co-pilot get out of his chair, kick you out of your chair, and take over the fucking plane. They're there to support you. They're a supporting role. They're not the main character. And I think that's another thing to speak to is some people they let their ego be the main character and their soul, their spirit, their raw, authentic being is playing the back, playing in the back, or sometimes they're sitting in the passenger seat. And that's a very dangerous way to live life because you're incredibly controllable there. Um, One other thing to explain is like how everyone talks about having an ego death. And I actually think quite the opposite because, like I said, I want my ego to be my co-pilot, and that requires it to be alive. An ego is like a living, breathing, or organic, real thing. And I just want it to operate in its role. I don't want to kill it though. Like you don't look at your co-pilot, shoot it in the skull, and then throw it out of the plane. Like you like somebody being there if you had to go to the bathroom for a moment, or if you needed to take a nap, or if you, whatever, right? Like it's nice to have that supporting role. It's nice to have that helping hand or somebody that could see your blind spots. So you said the ego blind spot. It's like, well, the ego's there to see the blind spots. It's just we don't know how to use it right. It's like a hammer never being used to build and only being used to kill, right? It's the same tool. It's just like, are you using it as a weapon or are you using it as a tool? It's up to you. How do you tap into the utility of the ego? So with that foundation, like I think there's something going on here where like spiritualism or the new age, I should call it, has done something to destroy the ego equally to the statism and the globalism and the demoralization and all of what they did. So they're actually quite equivocal. And to give a good example is, well, if you're demoralized, then of course you don't have an ego anymore. You have no protection methods because you are so easily controlled that they can say to you, put on a mask, stand 6 feet apart, take this jab. And like if everything is provably wrong on a scientific level and you still believe it, then that shows that your ego is already killed because a strong ego will protect itself from bullshit. It will go, that's a lie.
Mm.
You're a bullshit detector.
Mm.
That's a good thing. So the thing that I'm trying to explain here is that when you have no ego, then you have no identity. Huh? That's where you get the trans movement. That's where you get the like blurring the lines of polarity. It's by not having an ego. So we need to play the game here. Don't let the game play you. And I think that's kind of like the best way to draw out what's going on here because for me, I love taking ideas that become popular and going, what's the opposite of this idea? And then I explore that area. And that's been my own way of self-teaching myself. Like what Oscar Wilde says, everything popular is wrong. Well, everybody says the ego is bad, the ego is, kill the ego, this, that, and the third, but that's how cults are possible because it's just a group of people who've killed their ego. There's just now a central leader who has an incredibly powerful ego, and he's manipulating and controlling, or she is manipulating and controlling everyone who has no ego. But you realize that when people awaken when they're in a cult, it's because their ego starts to tap in. Their intuition starts to tap in for once. They now see the red flags and they're associating that with, oh shit, I should do something about this because I'm watching me decay more and more and more. Like the people that are deep into cults, they have no identity left, right? It's really tragic to see, but like that cognitive dissonance is strong. And during C19, we saw people that like it was a very extreme level of that, right? Obviously you and your audience know a lot about this, so there's no point of going there. But that was like an ego experiment of like everyone that was like, I'm not gonna wear a fucking mask. This is silly. Like everyone that was reacting that way, give yourself a round of applause because your ego is stronger than everyone else's. And that's a good fucking thing. When they're telling you that children, should be wearing dresses if they want to, and it's like a boy because they see another, parent that's allowing this. And it's like this stuff starts to like be fun at one point, and then it starts to be like epically crazy and silly at another point, right? Where you're like, what are we doing?
Mm.
This is starting to not have anything to do with reality, and it's all just having to do with like identity politics. So if you're a parent that goes, well, that's fucking silly, well, that means you have a strong ego. Congratulations, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't see any issue with this, but again, it's only controversial to those that always want to demonize the ego. And my whole thing is like, let's calm down here and realize that a hammer could be used to build a house too. And you're calling the ego the hammer that just smashes skulls. And I don't agree with this. Just like a phone, right? This thing could be used to just doom scroll on TikTok all day, or you can use this phone to create $1 million business. Which one do you want to, what do you want to do with it?
Mm.
The
Yeah.
game controller is in your hands, right?
Mm. Well said. And you do talk a lot about becoming a creator. If you want to build a business and thrive in the world, you've got to move from being the consumer into being the creator of the art or the business or the podcast or whatever it is. But you also talk a lot about enjoy the process and embrace the chaos because business life journeys is literally bouncing from, I say to people all the time, challenge is not a matter of if, it's when, um, how often, how big, but most importantly, how you deal with it.
Mm.
And that's sort of like a bit of a roadblock for some people. So, just go on the journey and enjoy it. I think you gave a good example the other day. If you could get in a time machine and go back and buy Bitcoin for the penny, you'd be a billionaire, but you would be soulless. Like, do you want to just touch on what you meant by that?
Yeah, it's so funny. Oh man, this is gonna be super controversial, so like please bear with me. But like, how everyone's like, if I had a time machine, I would go back and like kill Hitler, right? And I'm like, if I had a time machine, I would go back and have a scotch with Hitler. Like I would talk with the guy, like, what is he about? Like I've only learned about him. I've never like, what's the other side of the story, right? Like, why doesn't anyone want to say that?
Mm.
What's the problem here? And it's like, well, Waters, then that means you're an anti-Semite, Nazi supporter or something. And I'm like, that's insane to think that way. But that's how 99% of people would think.
Mm.
So there's just like, I look at life in a very interesting way where I'm like, where can I extract the opportunity in all the things? And I will get to your like core question here about the Bitcoin thing, but like it's like everyone is saying that they would use the time machine wisely by insert whatever reaction or response they would give, but I don't see the opportunity in any of that. Like for instance, if I told you, and Craig, of course you can just play along with me here, but if I was like, you get two meeting chances. One meeting is with like the guy who works at the gas station, or the other meeting is you get to talk with Klaus Schwab, like for free. Either person, you get 1 hour with them. Who would you pick? Like, well, the people that are like diehard anti-Illuminati or whatever, they'd be like, well, fuck Klaus Schwab, like he's a lizard person or whatever. But like you know the shit you're going to be able to hear from Klaus Schwab is going to be epic. Like if you really ask him effective questions, like that's a big part of my teaching model is AEQ, ask effective questions. You can extract so much information that is incredibly valuable for what you do and what you're interested in and what you know. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So like let's just be honest here. Like if I gave you two people to meet and one of them was like the person who works at Kmart and the other person was the Bill Gates, like
Mm.
you're gonna hang out with Bill for an hour. Like
Mm.
the shit this man knows about, like he has the secrets of the universe. Wouldn't you want to tap into that? If that was part of the deal, like he has to answer your questions truthfully. I mean, fuck, you'd be like, sign me up.
Mm.
So the same thing goes in any capacity. It's like I look at what's the opportunity, but I don't believe that I have the exact truth and knowing of how I would have handled those situations at that time. Hence why I made that joke about how everyone, like if you had a time machine, you'd probably go back and buy Bitcoin if it was like $1. Meanwhile, today there's tribalism over $100 Bitcoin, or sorry, $100,000 Bitcoin. And this kind of like tribalism is what I wanted to point out is perhaps the wisdom there. It's that like at a $1 Bitcoin there was tribalism, at $10 Bitcoin there was tribalism, at 100 people were saying this is too expensive, and then 1,000 they said this is too expensive. And you know me, brother, I'm not even a Bitcoin maxi. Like it's just part of my investment strategy. It's part of a much more philosophical and sophisticated investment thesis. But like bro, like we kind of all fuck ourselves up by being complicated when the answers are simple. Like Bitcoin back then would have been simple. You know, anything that you could go back and do where it tends to unlock the most utility is simplicity. And what that teaches me today is that how can I use that gnosis in the now so that when the next quote dollar Bitcoin comes around or whatever, I seize the opportunity, like which is called using your intuition and not getting swindled by everyone's belief systems, not getting hypnotized by everyone's, you know? So I think there's something to that. Like go back to why you didn't do the $1 Bitcoin. Why didn't you like ask that person on a date? Why didn't you like eat healthier that day? Why didn't you commit that year to your health? Why didn't you, you know? And then tap into that vulnerably and you start to extract a lot about like how can I be a better version of myself today?
Mm. Well said. And just on that, you talk about Bitcoin opportunity. You mentioned we're moving into the Aquarian economy and missed opportunities sort of fits into this question. Um, what is the Aquarian economy? So like people might be out there going, I've missed the dollar Bitcoin. I keep missing opportunities because I lack the good people to hang around, the mindset, the skill set, the talent, the information to position me there. I don't want to miss out on the Aquarian economy. What's that about? So I can start learning about that. Like that, I'm just talking generically.
Yeah,
I've heard
yeah.
you talk about it, but for people that may have never heard that term before.
Sure, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that need to be explained here. One of them is a very draconian world order that's moving in. That's not so like fun to talk about, but that's like the rip the band-aid off sort of like let's talk about the bullshit before we talk about the potential opportunities. So like I do see, unfortunately, a world order moving in that will be through popular decision more than anything else, similar to wearing masks. Like eventually when enough people complied, then they started mandating, doing all these orders where everyone had to comply. And it was through the base level consciousness of everyone. So what I'm revealing to everyone here is that like things like a central bank digital currency or like having a chip implant in the hands or like this type of stuff. Like I know it sounds crazy today, but you need to realize that like if enough organized chaos ensues and like enough of those chess moves are done by the elite in a matter that is very in alignment with their overall agenda and they strike when a time that we're not expecting it, well, then it's so easy for them to move forward with these protocols because they will have only left the base level consciousness that they're working with. You understand? So, like, the thing that I think is very important to lay out here is that I'm not a big proponent for blockchain technology in the belief that this is good. I think quite the opposite, and that is a moral dilemma when it comes to my investment thesis. And I'm very vulnerable and transparent about this all the time. So I do not support like Ripple and XRP. I don't support the technocrats that are behind this technocratic world order. I see it as an investment opportunity that I could then transmute that fiat cash, the money that I earned from it, into something that is more sovereign and something that is more about like me and my people. And for everything that I've studied, it keeps coming back to the same sort of outcome when it comes to blockchain technology and the quote unquote Aquarian economy that I'm calling it, where it has all the bullshit that you would see in like a Black Mirror episode. It's pretty much all of that. The reason why that's a thing is because that's their plan. And you could listen to like Peter Thiel. He doesn't even hide his vision about what he sees the world becoming and like how it will become. And it's pretty wild, man, when we get to a place where things will become so expensive. That's the first part of their agenda. Things will become so expensive that a social credit system will pretty much be what people opt out to. So that's one of the big things I see unfolding maybe in the next 5 to 10 years is like how to engineer a crisis where people will be accepting of a similar kind of idea to a social credit system, and that will be tied to this Aquarian economy. You can call it cashless society, you could call it whatever you want, but it will not be all negative. There will be components of it where it will take time. Just like when we got credit cards, not everyone got a credit card, like it took time. And there was a merit-based system that they put into the credit card that made you feel better if you did well at it, which is fucked up, but that's how the New World Order works. So they're going to be like if you're a good boy, you get a better, social credit score and then you get more opportunities for loans and like all of this stuff. So like that will be the system and it's no different than the current system we have where if you have a high credit score, you get better interest rates or whatever on the mortgage or it's all like operating under this guise. So I think blockchain technology is already built out and the infrastructure is ready to launch. It's just about like they need a strike at a time that's appropriate. And I think right now is a little too soon. But my take on the opportunity of it all is like just realize that because it's a nascent asset class, like it's a very infantile asset on the world stage, that there's tremendous ROI. And the fact that there is so much return on investment potential, that also means there's a ton of opportunity to lose a lot of money. So when you're hearing about people talk about, oh, crypto, I can make a 100x return, or you have to be aware that like in order to earn that type of money, you need to go through some pretty big swings. And then it comes back to like, we need to have so many more conversations to even offer, what is the true opportunity here? Because it's no one single answer. It's like, imagine you wanted to teach people how to make business and you taught people how to only make an e-commerce drop shipping business in 2019, right before C19 shut down that whole business model. But it's like e-com isn't gone. It's stronger than ever. Like drop shipping model is stronger than ever, right? But we had a moment where like it was fucked and they were censoring advertiser accounts and all of that. So like I'm in a position right now today where I feel like it's irresponsible to be like getting too many people caught up in the optimism of investing in crypto at these times, right? Because our whole economy is like a it's like a balancing on glass toothpicks, right? Like everything about it. Like I think are you Australian?
Yes.
Yeah,
Melbourne.
like I've looked at the Australian dollar a couple times recently, the chart, and it's like devastating, right? Like wild to watch how quickly that's devaluing. So I
Mm,
know the people in Australia are feeling it. Like they must be.
mm,
Everyone must be feeling that. And that's kind of engineering the crisis, right? And it happens in a very slow motion pace. And I think we could both agree that because of the base level consciousness of Australians, specifically people in Victoria and Melbourne, they're ready to do a lot of Aquarian essence stuff, you know? And I think it was proven with the C19 experiment, which was very successful in Melbourne. I actually lived there for like 8 or 9 months right before C19 happened, actually. So I
mm,
knew exactly why I should get the fuck out because I
mm,
just observed the base level consciousness. Like, what am I working with here? That's what I urge everyone to do. If you ever want to start a business with somebody, analyze their level of consciousness they're at. That will dictate how they will respond in a negative or a moment of loss. You need to be with resilient people, not compliant people.
mm.
And I guess, yeah, that Aquarian economy idea, it's very tough because there's so many layers to it that I'm not optimistic about, that I'm not happy about, that I don't want to promote. And just look at it as like one foot in the matrix, one foot out. And at this time, there's really not a perfect investment to get into because it's like getting in at the end of the dot-com bubble or something. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. Just got a couple of questions about health, but there's one metaphor that I think there's two that you've said and shared with, experiences to answer a question, so you may need to provide some context. But I think, there's some great wisdom when you talk about the sun. The sun can be good for you, but it can be bad if you stand too long in
Yeah.
it because it can burn you. And the other one was surfers need waves, waves don't need surfers. Do you want to?
Mm,
Like that, they were like two really like penny dropping. I talk about horse whispering moments, like, wow, that if you really think about that for a second, there's a lot of wisdom there. Do you want to? You might have to bring the context to those 2 points.
sure.
Really.
The surfer one I forgot. I wonder but I do know what you're talking about. But the thing about the sun is I was just saying, like, the sun doesn't tap you on the shoulder and tell you, like, hey, I'm about to burn your skin. Like the sun doesn't apologize after it gives you a sunburn. The sun doesn't apologize to you when there's clouds covering it and it's a rainy day. Like the sun doesn't say, "Hey, I'm shiny today. You're welcome." Like there's no communication method that we get to have and it has no ego in a sense. You know, like it's just this pure energy. Um, and I think that that's something we could learn a lot from. So what I mean here is that you, during the C19 scam, you decided to be the sun. And what happens is not everyone's ready to get their skin tan. Like, not everyone's ready to see the light. It like they need sunglasses. Because if you start speaking your truth, it's like you're being the sun. And that burns people. You know, people get too hot in that sauna, as I often say. You know, so it's like there's nothing wrong with embracing that, but it comes at the cost of like your lines of communication change. They just change because you need to become unapologetically, unwaveringly authentic, right? Again, the sun doesn't say, I'm sorry for burning you. It's just you need to learn how to protect yourself and get out of the room then if I'm here. Like you're in the room with a dragon and dragons breathe fire. But the dragon is also, you're in awe by its presence, right? So there's something beautiful there in that danger. It's the same thing with any majestic animal. Like a tiger, absolutely beautiful, very wise, but like you're its food. So the tiger doesn't apologize to you as it's ripping your stomach open. It's just you're my food and you got too close to me and I'm hungry. And this is my relationship with you. Your relationship with me is optics. My relationship with you is satiety. You know, like it's raw, but it's the way that it's the rules of nature. And I do very much believe that once we allow this into our consciousness, we then get to embrace the true self. So when you become the sun, now you get to embrace the true self. And yeah, the thing about the surfer, what did you say again? I'm trying to remember.
You said surfers need waves to surf, but waves don't need surfers to something like that. Or
Yeah,
was
that's
it?
fire. I don't really know if it needs more context. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like I think in this world, we do kind of just need to allow for that truth to be because that's what being a human is, right? Like as a human, like we need that entertainment. We need that something to do. I actually teach about this. We have like the three core pieces to reality. Number one is survival, right? We all know this. Like the reason the tiger eats you is because of survival. And the reason you don't eat the tiger is because you don't need tigers to eat because you have sandwiches and chips and, fruit or whatever. Like for you, it's not like survival mode. You're there actually to look at the lion or the tiger as entertainment, right? Okay, so number one is survival. Then number two is comfort, right? Again, animals don't have the same relationship with comfort that you or I have. Like you don't see fucking penguins making comforters or making like a couch in the snow to sit on. Like we're we're the only thing that does this actually. And whenever you do see an animal constructing something with nature, it's because it has a lot of utility for everything else in the habitat, in the whole ecosystem, like a beaver making like damming up a river or some shit. Like it actually is purposeful for everything in the locale, right? While a human getting a couch has no impact on every other human's well-being or comfort. It's a very like we do everything out of comfort on a very selfish, which is fine. I'm not challenging this truth, I'm just revealing it, right? So it's like we have survival. Clearly, humans have surpassed this tenfold. We have comfort, also have surpassed this tenfold, right? House is hot, turn on the aircon. House is cold, turn on the heater. You have cleaner water coming out of your toilet bowl than people had to drink 50 years ago out of their faucets, right? So now the next thing would be stimuli, and that's where it comes back to the entertainment. So if we want utility out of our stimuli, it's like just realize that like the surfer going with his board to the ocean to ride the waves is not just doing it for like the entertainment of it. They're actually doing it because it's like it's their moment to be one with something. Like they actually get to be married to something for a moment. And for them, that access is what we call flow state. That's way beyond meditation. That's like a very high level to get to, where you can find your thing, where it allows you to feel one with everything for a moment, right? But with that knowing still, like the wave doesn't need you. The sun doesn't need you. The penguin doesn't need you. The tiger doesn't need you. Whether you are here or not here. And the reason I say that is because people walk around right now thinking they deserve something, right? People walk around right now being like, "Oh, I worked so hard. Like, why can't I figure it out? Like, why, like, I deserve this, I deserve that." It's like, no, like, first of all, you don't deserve anything, and nobody promised you that this life would be comfortable. You've made it comfortable, and that's numbed you. That's actually harmed you more than it's helped. Hence why I think you're realizing also there's a huge push right now from like the biohacking people to get into things like cold plunges and sauna. And it's like what we're realizing here is that like, oh, we are engineering uncomfortability. That is like, no offense, the most egoic fucking shit of all time because it's all ego driven. It's not about healing. It's not about actually being healthy anymore. It's about like everything needs to have a purpose. Everything is a mathematical equation for humans. Whilst when you're in flow state, there is no equation. There is zero. It's not one plus one equals two, or one, you made the joke earlier where like COVID was happening, one plus one equals four, right? That's even more fucked up. Then you have the like, I'm zero. I'm the sun. I'm a circle. Like I'm all. And the energy gets to bounce around this sphere indefinitely. It has no corners. It has no edges. It's just it is. So the summary of this whole like stream of consciousness is that I guess there'd be a lot of glory in our world if we had more people who just did things to access flow state rather than doing things for pure entertainment, just to like fill their mind with useless bullshit. And then the other thing is to do everything to prove it. you know? Like we have a surfing competition, right?
Mm,
I heard that somebody told me that in like Russia they have like a witch competition, like a paranormal like where like you ta I know it sounds silly, but like to them they take it very seriously. And my whole response to it was like, holy shit, our ego is wild.
mm,
Like we're turning this into a game show, and some people think it's awesome. And I think it's like this is the worst thing we can do with magic, with esoteric wisdom, with Gnosticism, with all of this occult knowledge, is let's turn it into a fucking game show,
mm,
right? And that's what we do with life. So it's like once we get so comfortable and once we get so stimulated from it, we're like, we need a grand prize now. We need a fucking trophy to give the guy for and then this again, it kind of deletes the whole like you see where I'm not trying to get off the rails here, but I'm starting to analyze life more from a vantage point of like if I can be the best version of myself, it's by removing all those factors. Remove the competition, remove the proving myself, remove all of that, and get to the core base foundation of like, can I be one with it? And that flow state to me allows for that, that it's like being recharged again or something. It's like getting to really recharge. And don't you also feel if you're into health and wellness, people are like, "Oh, I need a recharge. I need to take like a B12 shot or I need to do a cold plunge." It's like everything is more to these people.
mm,
It's always more, and it's always because it's in this grand equation that their ego designed. And I guess that's my thing that I'm trying to work with more in the world is to like how do I speak this way with people for those aha moments so they
mm,
start to realize like it's not all what you think it is. And this comes back to a key point that we were talking about earlier that's like if you had a plan to get into sports, then God breaks your arm, you know? Like
mm,
stop being so in control of it because for you, if you think that the cold plunge is healing you, that's where God makes it damage you.
mm,
Because it's like the source of everything isn't trying to work in a math equation like this. The same thing with gematria, the same thing with numerology. Like everything in life, it's not this, it doesn't have much meaning actually. It just has what does it make you feel? So I'll wrap up the idea there. It's like it doesn't have any meaning. It's what does it make you feel? Like love, right? You don't have a reason or explanation for why you love your wife or whatever. It's just a feeling that you have.
mm.
And you know it. I think the Matrix movie says the same thing when he meets the Oracle for the first time. It's a beautiful moment in that movie because it reveals exactly what we're talking about here.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. With health, because you're a wizard in that space as well, and you were talking about the mind, controlling the mind and the central nervous system, how important that is to, I guess, control health and vitality and well-being. Do you want to explain how that works?
Well, I think the number one thing is like be less emotionally reactive to everything. Like if you eat food nervously and quickly, which I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm not perfect with either. Like if you're not present with the food you're eating, or let's just say like you got into an argument with somebody, right? And then you're sitting down having a meal. Well, like your food has that energy of the argument, right? So it's not nourishment anymore. And then it gets even worse when people are like calories, protein, carbohydrates, fiber, vitamin C. Like the human is the only thing that does this, that isolates and isolates and isolates to the quark. And then we end up where it's just a big ego trip of meaning, purpose, and reason. And truthfully, if we were to clear our minds of all of that stuff, of all the education on it, and you just look at it for what it is, which it's nourishment, food is nourishment, and you hold the vibrational frequency that affects either the food you're cooking or the food you're consuming, well then now you have a whole deeper conversation on food or health and wellness in general. So I mean, I could go many different angles on it there, but I think like that right there is a huge like pineal buster for a lot of people because it's going to get them to be a little more dialed in when they eat their next meal. You know, they're going to go about it in a different way. But is there something specific that you wanted to?
Um, you were talking the other day, like I think the conversation was around it was probably nearly diet has become a religion these days, and people have theories on the, you got to be all plant-based, and then
Yeah.
the meat eaters will go, no, no, and then you sort of mention, no, no, we're not carnivores, we're omnivores, or you sort of started talking about that, which
Mhm.
I think you probably covered it there, but um, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the word diet has die in it, right? So it's like everybody who taps into some really occult knowledge on food, it has this awareness that like food ages us. Like food actually, all food is slowly pushing your body into a energetic state where it needs to compromise digestion. It's called digestion. Yeah. So it's in our language. They're just telling you what it is. So the process of consuming requires a lot of energy to digest food. And when you, bro, haven't you ever had like a really great conversation with somebody and it's like you don't even need to eat? Or like if you get into your flow state at work and you do something that's really creative and like really fun, like you don't even need to eat. Like it happens to me all the time when I'm working on something. I'm like, I notice like so many hours go by and like I was just feeding off of my own prana, like my own life force as I was one in that flow state. So I think the surfer analogy is like he's being fed by the surfing of the waves. Like that flow state. I'm not trying to say that you have to be like a fucking breatharian or anything. Like that's not my point, obviously. But I'm trying to reveal to people that like what happens is when you have no thing to be passionate about or to access that flow state, then your day becomes three meals, right? It becomes, I need to eat breakfast. I need to eat. Well, then what happens is your day becomes about the food you eat, not about you experiencing the day, which, by the way, day comes from die. And we just covered that a moment ago, right? This is why they say good morning when you go to sleep and then you wake up, right? You know all about this. So it's like we mourn when we're at funerals, which we call wakes. Good morning. You woke up. We went to your funeral today, right? It's fucking confusing. So everything is language spells, and I guess that's kind of what I was trying to tap into at the intro today.
Mm,
Is the more and more I learned about like the words that I speak, I started to unlock a lot of utility for like, oh, I'm learning now intuitively through studying my language. Now I'm aware that when I digest, I need to do whatever it takes to be alive, not dying. And I think everything kind of now has more like alchemy to it. Like there's an alchemical protocol instead of cold plunging because I want my, to tap into the brown adipose tissue or whatever the fuck some scientist says. It's like I want to be one in that moment with that feeling. Like that's all I want to be. And even that desire is unnecessary. It's like start doing life without the um yeah, without the identity to it. And I guess that's kind of what I was responding to with the whole vegan or carnivore or whatever sort of deal is like first and foremost, a human has food choice. You're like a food choicist. You're a uh you're a carnist, not a carnivore. Humans are carnists. You've adapted your diet regime around a belief system that you learned or was culturally a part of your life from childhood. It's pretty much ends there. So everyone that tries making an argument of like this diet is better than the other diet is better than the other diet, it's like for me it's exhausting because
yeah.
I think it all comes back to your belief system anyways. You whatever you believe is what you honor as truth. So if you believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, well that is your that's reality to you, right? Some people don't even know who Jesus is. They've never heard of this character. They live in a fucking jungle somewhere. You know what I mean? It's like when people start going about life as if there's this universal order that is applicable to everyone, I find that to be a very dangerous quality about humans that I avoid at all costs. But I suspect like one of the superpowers that I have is being the mirror for those people so that they drop that like association as truth and just realize it for what it is, which it's like it's part of your current knowledge set. And eventually you'll have new experiences in life that might adjust that knowledge set. You know, I'll share a story very quickly with you. Did you ever hear my story that I shared about the mushroom experience where I saw this deer?
No.
Oh, okay, yeah. I used to talk about it a lot, like maybe before you joined my channel, but like when I first started my channel, people asked me a lot about like these experiences of like what got me to making these connections or understanding of the world. And I remember vividly this one time where I did mushrooms and I was walking around and I saw a deer and I looked at the deer in the eyes and the deer basically telepathically, and I know this sounds fucking crazy. I still think it sounds crazy, by the way. So it is what it is, guys. But like the deer was basically telepathically telling me that we allow you to do this. And then I back responded back being like, what do you mean this? Like, what are you talking about? And the deer says, we allow you to do this. And I said, like, I need clarity here, right? What the fuck are you talking about? And it said that everything, and I mean, like, what do you mean everything? Like, be society, like, control, like, have laws, drive cars, like, build streets. And it was like everything. And I'm like, what about kill you and eat you? He's everything. We allow you to do all of this. And then I said, you allow us? Like, you're so, like, you don't need to be this way. You could end all of this shit we're doing right now. And they're like, yes, we can end this, what you do, but we allow you to do this. I was fucking crying, like how profound that was because it was I tapped into like the holy shit. We think that we rule the world and that we control everything, but like actually, animals are so sacrificial to our what do we call this? Our hubris? I don't know what we even say this is because we don't honor any animals anymore, right? We literally put them in controlled camps and murder them for food, right? Like that's kind of what the world has come to. We put them in zoos,
Mm.
right? Or we put them in our houses and call them pets. So this is all like part of the we allow you thing. And I started to connect the dots and I really had this confrontational, like, inner conversation where I was so humbled because I was like, so you allow us to dominate this earth. It's not that we dominate this earth, it's that you dominate this earth and you allow us to think we dominate this earth. And it was like, yes. And I was like, that's the most beautiful experience I've ever had in my life. It's beyond any human experience. It shows me that we need to tap into gratitude for everything that we have here, and we need to drop this superiority complex of knowing that we have it all figured out. And truthfully, there's something very powerful going on here that is operating in respect and in loyalty to humans being able to have the most beautiful experience here in this matrix. And 99.99% of us drop the fucking ball. We don't even make this realization that the world is as it is for you to grow, for
Mm.
you to extract this higher knowing, or just, I call it remembering. Like I say often, like I'm not teaching anyone anything. Like I'm just reminding you of things you've always known, and you're reminding me things of that I've always known. And that's the relationship we all have with each other. Like nobody's getting more here. We're just kind of unlearning all the nonsense and replacing it with this memory that has
Mm.
kind of been confiscated from us through the process of ritual, through birth, to everything else that happened in our lives. I think there's a Hollywood movie that actually shows this. I don't remember which one.
Mm. Yeah, I actually am quite often in when I'm being on other people's podcasts. I always do say to people, I turn money into memories because I think I've traveled to 120 different cities in the world, played charity basketball in the Philippines, spoke on live TV in Lebanon. been in a terrorist attack in Turkey, been one-star hotels in India, $3,000 a night hotels in Bora Bora, traveled through Africa. Sort of, I find that I dial into those conversations and experiences and memories more than nearly anything that I've really ever done. That's sort of when people ask me about travel, I say, you got to do it because the memories and the conversations, and you can go into any room with random nobodies that you've never met before and be their best friend by the end of the night through sharing travel stories. That's my take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, it's about practicing being relatable. Like, and we all want to experience vicariously through others. So it's very attractive to meet somebody who's done all this traveling, if you're interested, which most people are. And yeah, that's definitely something I promote to everyone who wants to ask me, like, well, Waters, where's the best place to live? Or what's the best? I tell people I don't have the answer for what is the best place for you to live because you need to go explore life and feel it for yourself. Like, and don't get suckered into this idea that somebody has your truth for you. And traveling, I think, kind of allows you to acquire that experience for sure, to get your hands in the sand and be like, do I enjoy this? Is this really right for me? And to not just take everything at the value of somebody else's, review.
Mm. Just from a health perspective, you mentioned about nearly foods become religion, cult-like in some instances, different techniques, cold plunging, like fasting's probably been the big one of
Mhm.
recent times. I reckon every second post I see, I've just finished a 72-day fast and I, reveal God and and you've sort of recently said, look, if you dry fast from the last bit of food 5 o'clock at night till 3 hours after you get up in the morning, that's really all your body needs. Do you want to explain, is there any better benefit from going for a week at a time?
Yeah, there is definitely specific benefits for doing extended fasts, but dry fasting is its own animal. So, like when we're talking about restricting all liquid intake as well as food intake, then yeah, you're in the big leagues, and a lot of people aren't ready for that. I think there's like as anything in life, there's a practice to it. So when you get into the 3 day dry fasting, like you're pretty elite. And I know some people that are very experienced, like specifically in the fasting community, they'll be like, oh, I could do 5 days, I could do 7 days, as if it's better for you. And I don't actually think it's like everything where there's diminishing returns, diminishing, kind of quality. So my kind of like cheat code here is that most people have this like addiction to water, like where they think water is like healing you or it has these like properties that are somehow making everything better for you. But a lot of the time, water doesn't interstitially hydrate the cells. So water just passes through the digestive system, you piss it all out, and it serves a purpose for sure. Like if you're somebody who's drinking alcohol, I would totally say drink a lot of water in that situation. But if you're somebody who's trying to be hydrated, then I would say consume raw fruit because that actually has organic minerals packed within the fluid, and that will be filling within the cells. So you have interstitial hydration. You don't eat an orange and then piss out all the orange juice. Well, when you drink water, you pretty much do piss out all the water. So getting to the point here is that like when it comes to intermittent fasting or like time restricted feeding, if you wanted to have a superior protocol, it would be instead of drinking water during all the hours you're fasting. So that was kind of the reason I brought up the water thing. Get rid of the water and just dry fast through that whole time. So now the genius here is that you're giving your kidneys a break. Most people never give their kidneys a break. They're always drinking water. They're always eating food. They're always snacking. And then it's more water. And then it's just like this addiction to getting this however many liters of water a day thing that the quote unquote medical professionals suckered everyone into. And it's like if you eat a half a watermelon, you do not need to drink 2 liters of water today. You just don't because you'll hold all of that liquid. And then on top of that, it stores in you way longer too, and it digests way faster too when it comes to comparing it to solid food or cooked meals, for instance. So, long story short here is that the time restricted feeding protocol only to me makes sense if you're going to do it dry fasted because you want that moment for the kidneys to get a break. But there's always all these other benefits like autophagy and just increase in HGH and human growth hormone. It's dependent on like what's your purpose of doing it. If you're an athlete, it'll be so different than if you're somebody who's like trying to recover from an illness or somebody that is trying to detox because detox is different from recovery, right? Detox is you're trying to push out shit that doesn't want to leave you. And this could be stuff that could be in you when you're not seemingly sick or showing any symptoms of sickness. So they're totally different. And you'll only really accomplish that. So I'll wrap this idea up, Craig. It's like you'll only really accomplish detox by going through an extended fasting protocol. So we're talking 48 to 70, 2 hours or so of dry fasting. That's when you'll push out gunk, like stuff that is in the intestine that shouldn't be there, that's been stored there. Your body will start to remove that sort of stuff. Same thing with any excess well, let's just keep it simple. Like if you're any have any skin problems are a direct they're directly tied into the lymphatic system, which has to do with your kidneys. So we see a lot of people who decide to do a 3 day dry fast and they clear so many skin issues. And then when they break their fast the right way and start eating right way again, instead of the old way they used to eat, they can now sustain the results from just 3 days. The same thing with weight loss. Like people who want to lose weight effectively, instead of starving yourself and then drinking a fuck ton of water, you should just practice 2 days of fasting every week and you'll speed up your results. You won't have this like loose hanging skin. You'll have tighter skin because when you dry fast, your body tightens up. A lot of people don't talk about this. You heal the skin. So there's so many things to share in regards to the dry fasting protocol, but a good starting point is what I shared with the wait like 5 hours before you go to sleep, um, stop drinking water, stop eating, and then 3 hours after you wake up, don't eat, don't drink. And even if you wanted to break your fast with coffee, at like 9 a.m., if you wake up at 6, that's also fine. Like I'm not anti anything here with this protocol. I think people obviously know not to eat burgers and French fries all day if you're trying to get healthy.
Mhm. And just on the coffee thing, I love my coffee. Last year I tried to pattern break, and I went 4 months without having one, but I didn't sort of feel any major difference either way. From when I did definitely for the first 3 or 4 days afterwards, but the person that enjoys a wine and a coffee, but everything else in your diet's all right, would, do you sort of say just stop doing all of that and be healthy without that, or do you see a place for um, guilty pleasures?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of like, I don't even associate with this idea of guilty pleasures. Like, I think there's a higher quality version of everything in this world. Like, I'm really into art in general, and I'm really into culinary arts. And like, nobody can argue with me that, some shelf liquor that's $5 for a bottle of, rum is the same as 30-year-old rum that's been sitting in barrels, bourbon barrels, and it's been treated by a family business that's been doing this for 4 generations, and every little detail and nuance from the fucking barrel to the bottle they put it in is part of the conscious effort and intent to provide you with the best quality product. They're just not the same.
Mm.
So I don't like when people call alcohol bad for you or coffee is bad for you or this is bad for you. It's like no, because it's art, and when you see the art in life, then you start to extract the value and the qualities that it all has. Like a 30-year whiskey has 30 years of consciousness that's been stored in that. It has so many hands it's touched. So many people have put their energy into it. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
a living being at that point. It's no different. So I
mm,
think I don't understand how these so-called health experts are trying to tell me that something that has 30 years of life force moving through it and all these relationships that formed in the process of it going from Mother Nature to product that you get to consume is somehow worse than taking a fucking pill that's been created by some supplement company and it's been tested for whatever, metrics that qualify it as healthy. I'm like, what are we talking about here? We're literally talking about synthetic supplement industry that's been promoted to me as it's good for me and healthy. And then the same people are trying to tell me that something that is made in Mother Nature, that is pretty much an expression of nature through the process of fermentation. You see, like the people that are health gurus right now hate me with what I'm
mm,
saying because they're like, it derails their whole fucking business model. But what I'm trying to say is I don't even look at the guilty pleasure thing. I look at it's an opportunity to become educated. When you educate yourself on the process of how coffee goes from farm to cup, now you become part of the process. So how is it unhealthy for people in Ethiopia who the women are fresh roasting the beans and then they're grinding it up fresh and then everything is ritual to them. How is that the same as a K cup that you just put in the machine and you knock down the lid and electricity runs through it and it's a cup? It's not the same.
mm,
So I guess my whole protocol here when it comes to health is like we need to go back and undo all of the teachings of it all and go to like how can I educate myself more on what's the process behind how this thing comes to be? And then how can I consciously seek the highest quality version of that thing? And then I don't find it to be a guilty pleasure. It's only guilty pleasure when we know that it's highly synthetic, manufactured, heavily processed, and we have no relationship with it at all. We have no understanding of its origins. Like when you get McDonald's fries, you don't know what fucking potato they're using. Like you don't know you don't know the relationship between farm to table, right?
mm,
So I guess yeah, there's something to that I rather put more energy into in the conversation of health and wellness than like just sit around and identify this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad because that's what humans fail at the most is just saying that this is what's good and this is what's bad and then we get nowhere.
mm. And in regards to pattern breaking, is there a strategy you would use to, you know, stop habitual activities, smoking, drugs, whatever?
Well, I think big piece to the habitual things comes back to like what's your relationship with it? Like a lot of people who are into smoking, they have like an oral fixation. So like they just like the movement of taking the object and putting it to the lips and inhaling, that's actually so much more powerful than the thing that the cigarette is made of. So there's like this we also can study this with body movement. Like some people just move in a certain way. Like, they blink a certain way, they make certain facial expressions. Like this is all part of the patterning. So when somebody gets into smoking, they're reprogramming their subconscious and their like body for a pattern. And this pattern is so much more powerful than the actual thing that they're consuming. Does this make sense?
Mm,
Yeah. So my thing is like once you become more consciously aware of what your behavior is, I call it stalk thyself. Like once you observe yourself and you see the way that you're behaving, and you can now be honest with yourself in that behavior, then it no longer is about the cigarette anymore. It's more about like what's your relationship with the cigarette? Well, it's a toxic relationship, clearly, right? It controls you, you don't control it. The cigarette is your God.
mm,
So I would say that to these people, and I know it's kind of sharp and maybe tough to hear, but It's better than me saying, it's not healthy for you. It's like, no, it's just, it's the puppet master and you're the puppet. And when it's time to smoke, you assume position. It says jump and you say how high. And that's your relationship with it. And that's fine. Like, I think manning up and just, and having that, moment to go within and being like, well, this is how I am with this thing. That honesty will allow you to actually start to adjust. Because what we've realized in people who become like really overweight is they look in the mirror and they're just like, I don't want to be that person anymore. It's kind of a beautiful thing to just be like, I've confronted the inevitable truth that if I keep doing this and don't change, I will die. Like I will literally eat myself to death.
Mm.
And my method is like, okay, I want to do the whole process with people. So, like, first is let's be as vulnerable as possible, stalk thyself, observe your behavior, take an inventory of like what it is that what's your relationship with this stuff now? How do we re-engineer the process so that there's no concern about the outcome because you know where you're going with this? It's to be the best version of yourself. And if you continue the way that you're doing it, we're not going to get anywhere. It's just leading you down this slippery slope. You're digging your own grave, right?
Mm.
And my process is everything we talked about today. Like, if I was working with somebody who is obese, I don't want to take away all these quote unquote guilty pleasures. I want to figure out ways that we can educate, we could start to reveal what's going on here in the food system, the chemicals and all the stuff that is being put in the food, what you're consuming. Educate them on what it is that you're consuming, and then replace. Everything is about replacement instead of, I did this with my grandma actually, where she's diabetic and she's Italian, so like old Italian lady loves her pasta and all this stuff. And I said, all right, grandma, like I want you to, I literally told her this. I said, we're gonna help you lose weight and we're gonna reduce these medications. And she's like, okay, how are we gonna do it? And I said, I want you to eat all the pasta possible. And she said, what the fuck are you talking about? And I said, okay, eat all the pasta you want, but no olive oil, no oil at all, and no Parmesan cheese. You could only put like sauce and vegetables. It has to be as whole food as possible, no oil. So I didn't want her consuming any fat, because this is particularly triggering. Animal products and fat are very, processed fat, by the way, is very triggering to people who are diabetic. So and also the trick here is like with type 2, you just need to lose weight and you'll naturally start lowering your insulin. Like it's a basic trick, right? So just anything that helps people lose weight. Well, all the empty calories were now out of the picture. So she's eating a bunch of fruit. I told her instead of eating your typical breakfast, I want you to only eat fruit. And then when it comes time to dinner, eat as much pasta as you want. Just if you want bread, no butter on the bread. Like I was just telling her to be like super carb heavy and starch. Like this is super counterintuitive to what everyone was teaching. But the digestive system pattern break that occurred was dramatic weight loss, reduction in waist size. She started being able to have less inflammation, so climbing up the stairs in her house was so much less painful for her, and she dropped a bunch of medications. It was like a miracle um that this worked, and the reason it worked is because I didn't restrict her.
Mm.
I gave her the thing that she liked the most and I said gorge on that, like have as much of that as you want. We just need to make a couple replacements and then we need to make a couple serious removals, like some things that we really remove. Otherwise, we wouldn't, like if somebody has a porn addiction, we have to work with them in a very nuanced way, you know? Like it's super serious. Some people's marriages fall apart because of this. So when I get clients that are like dealing with that, I'm like, okay, well, we need to take this for what it is and come up with a protocol where like it's not the full-blown removal of the thing. I know it sounds fucking crazy to some people, but it's like the world is going through this right now. Many people are having problems with food, social media addiction, obviously porn addiction, many things that are like lowering the human force and only being this unconscious consumer. And everything is about like pleasure and never having any pain at all. and numbing the any pain that shows up with the artificial pleasure, rinse, repeat. But
Mm.
brother, I just noticed it's been about 2 hours, and I
Yeah,
have a meeting that I need to catch up on coming up. But it was amazing to chat with you for a
yeah.
couple hours.
And just I can wrap up there, but just where do people find you?
Yeah, so the easiest place would be YouTube, Waters Above at YouTube, or you could check out my website, watersabove.com. That's a great place to start. My YouTube channel, believe it or not, focuses a lot on technical analysis and crypto investing and decoding the markets. I know we didn't talk too much about that today, but if you're interested in any of that stuff and how to do it in a way that is what I believe the most honorable delivery of it. I'm not going to shill anything. I don't take any paid sponsorships or promotions from any crypto company or exchanges or any of that. I just share kind of where we're at in the economy right now and how we can navigate it.
Mm. Beautiful. And from me, I want to thank you for sharing absolute wisdom. I wanted to get the hoarse, whispering voice of reason, pure wisdom drops from you for the audience so they can dive deep and expand accordingly. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate you and definitely looking forward to connecting again soon.
Cheers.
All right, man. Much love. Take care.